It's now been 6 months since I first received the new Infinity EVERREADY race board. Since that time, I've tested it out in a variety of conditions, training, and races. I've come to know this board in a deeper way in terms of how it handles, what it's good at, and what I find challenging about it. So, grab a seat and let's talk about if this is the right board for you. Alright, before we dive into today's video and talk all about this Infinity EVERREADY race board, I've got to show you something. And it may not be very special to you guys right now, but for me, it's very special. And you can almost see it on my face right now. And that, my folks, is some blue sky. Just look it up there. It's such a beauty. Even though, yes, it is like still 90% cloudy, I'm going to enjoy this 10% of sunshine because here in the Pacific Northwest, getting a sunny day like this is a rarity, so I'm going to enjoy it. And it's a little bit chilly today as well, like probably just above 40 degrees. So I got some gear on today to stay a little warm or warmer in case I fall in the water, which hopefully doesn't happen on today's paddle session. But with that being said, let's get into the nitty gritty of today's video and talking all about this Infinity EVERREADY race board. So today I was coming to share with you guys kind of my experience of using this board, which I honestly can't believe it's already been 6 months of me paddling this board for a majority of all my paddle sessions on the water. And I've learned a lot about it from my chill paddle sessions to my races. And there's so much that I love about this race board, so I want to share with you guys, first off, some things that I love about it, and then some things that I've found almost challenging about using it as well in certain conditions. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and also share about who this board is designed for, and to see or help you guys decide if you're looking for a new race board, if this is the board for you. So with that being said, let's first start off before I go off in today's paddle session on today's water, talking about 4 areas that I've really found this thing to excel at and that I really, really enjoy about this new board. Let's take a breath, slow things down a little bit, and let's get today's video started. All right, some first things first, we got the dugout design on this race board. And this feature right here has been so nice to have. If you're familiar with at all about the Infinity race boards, the board that was kind of designed before this one was a Blackfish, and they also had a dugout version of the Blackfish. Now on that one, the dugout was not quite as deep as this dugout is on the EVERREADY race board. So having this deeper dugout design has been really, for me, such an enjoyable thing to have on a narrow race board. This board I have right here and I've been using is 22.5 inches wide, and that is by far the narrowest board I've ever paddled on and used as my race board or just daily driver in general. And so by paddling on a narrow board, having this deeper dugout design really is a game changer for me because I'm a tall person. I'm 6'4" tall, and so my center of gravity is way up there. So by having my center of gravity brought lower to the water surface, by having this deeper dugout design, for me, it provides a lot of extra stability because it gets my center of gravity from being higher off the water surface to lower to the water surface by having the deeper dugout design on this board. So I love that feature about it. And with that too, that brings to my second pro about this board, is by having this really deep dugout design right here on the board, really creates an incredible secondary stability on this board. So you can take your feet here and really lock your feet on either side of the handle here against the side rails and really push against those rails for extra stability side to side for increased stability, as I said, especially in choppier conditions. So that, for a secondary pro, has been so nice to have because there have been some days I've gone paddling where it's been very choppy and challenging to maintain like really good balance on the board. By having these really tall rails on the side right here allows me to get a lot of pressure with my feet to kind of lean against those rails as my board rolls side to side to increase my stability and that secondary stability as I'm paddling those chopper conditions. So huge pro right there. The next pro that I've really enjoyed about this board in comparison to its predecessor, the Blackfish dugout, is that it now has a much narrower nose design right here. So you can probably see it right here. Sorry if my shadow's in the way. But anyway, it's got this much more drawn in nose, and this nose does an incredible job at punching through any kind of chop. Just small chop on a small or light breeze day to really big chop on like a really like choppy downwind session or paddling upwind and some really strong winds. This nose right here does an incredible job at just like, just slicing through that chop like butter. And it's so nice because on the old board I used to use, the Blackfish Dugout, still did a pretty good job at punching through that chop, but the nose was not quite as sharp as this nose is right here. So because of that, it was more like you had to kind of push through that chop as you're paddling upwind, where this board just cuts through like butter and allows you to maintain your speed and your glide so much better as you're punching up that wind. And so, really great feature about this board. And that brings me to my last biggest pro about this board, is that it has incredible glide. Like, it's so good. That's like the first thing I noticed when I first started riding this board. From the very first time I stepped on it for the first paddle session, is that this board just sails across the top of water surface, and it's such a good feeling when you're just paddling so effortlessly on the water, and your board just carrying you along the water surface as you're paddling along. We're putting in some strong, powerful strokes. This board is just like keeping your speed right with you as you're paddling along for those harder strokes. Man, it's such a good feeling to have. So if you've ever experienced that feeling, it's a good one. This board does an incredible job at having such good glide and allows you to maintain a really good distance between your strokes, keeping your speed up to top speed as you're paddling on the. Whew. So this board does such a good job at maintaining a really good glide and maintaining your speed for any kind of race you're doing, or even just for your chill paddles, making it more effortless for you to paddle on the water. So there are a lot of pros about this board, which I love, but for me, over the past 6 months of paddling this board, those are kind of just 4 major areas that I've noticed that I've really enjoyed about using this board. Now, before I dive into some areas that I feel like I've kind of struggled in with using this paddle board, let's first just head out for a paddle session here on the water, because I definitely want to take advantage of this 10% of sunshine I got here today. Enjoy some time out on the water. Man, it is so glassy calm out here today. Whew. Genuinely could not get much better than this. Although my hands and face are a little bit chilly right now. Still a beautiful day out here. Let's dive into the 2 areas now that I've found just a little bit challenging about using this board this year. And that first one is doing pivot turns and walking into that pivot turn stance on this board. So this board, the tail of the board is brought in a little bit more, so the tail of the board is a little bit narrower than I was used to, for example, on the previous Blackfish race board I was using. Now the pro about this more drawn in, narrower tail design is that when you are in the pivot turn stance, it does turn really easily and quickly because you're just dealing with less board volume back there to have to try to sink into the water and turn around. So by having that less volume back there, you're able to sink it easier and really get turned around much faster. The con with that though, that I've noticed obviously, is that it makes it a little more challenging in terms of stability. Once you get back there, it makes it turn easy. At the same time, it is that much easier just to go whoop and fall right off your board trying to do a pivot turn stance. So with that, I've had to really work on just understanding how this board moves below my feet, especially for pivot turns, and staying on the tail of the board, and just really trying to learn that new center of gravity point to gain more control back there. But it's been a hard learning curve, like no doubt. That's why I'm saying it's a challenging part about this board, is that if you're not comfortable doing pivot turns, walking back on a narrow race board like this one at 22.5 to the tail of the board that is very narrow and not much volume to it, can make it very challenging to try to maintain your balance in pivot turns. So obviously, as you get a wider board, you get like a wider version of this race board, you'll start to gain that stability back again. But with this model at 22.5, it's a challenge. And so just from my personal experience, if you're someone who's not comfortable doing pivot turns on a narrow race board, this one is gonna be challenging as well. It's not gonna get any easier for you. So something to definitely consider about this board at the narrower width, well, pivot turns will be a challenge. The second one also has to do with stability. And that is on this board, the new design of this board in comparison to Blackfish. So this board has more rounded rails on the bottom side of it. So with that, the pro of that design is they're able to kind of go over like side chop easier, or you have more control over board and directing it where you want to go. For example, if you're going like in and out of draft trains when races, you're able to kind of get over this the draft or the side chop from boards that you're dragging behind or drafting behind. Or if you're on a paddling on a windy day and you have some like side chop on your board, you're able to kind of like lean on your outside rail and kind of let that chop push under your board easier, allowing you to kind of fight from being turned by the wind. So that's nice about the rounded rails, you're able to have more control. Downside is, once again, with stability. You're losing stability because of that. Now, with that being said, even look, the part that's been challenging for me is that this board rolls a lot more below my feet here. Ooh, almost fell in there. In comparison to like the Blackfish that had more squared off rails to it. So with that, you're kind of more locked in, and great for flat water days, but for windier days, that more squared off rail to it on the Blackfish, it was harder to fight the side chop. It kind of pushed you. But with this one, since it rolls more, well, like I said, the pro, I can go across the side chop easier, but the downside is stability feels like less. But there's a point when you're rolling, well, the board does catch again. You kind of feel it where it's like, all right, I got stability again. But getting to that point, the board rolls a lot farther to the side in comparison to a board with more squared off rails to it. So for me, that's been the second most challenging thing about this board, is learning how to be comfortable having a board that really moves below my feet here. So when I did my first race on it, was actually, no joke, the first time I rode this board was I did my first race on it here in Washington State. And I fell quite a bit because I wasn't used to this roll. And whenever it started to tip on me like that, I didn't know where to grab again. I didn't have trust in that roll. And so I fell off my board quite a few times in that race. Since that time, I learned to gain confidence in that roll, understanding where it's gonna catch again, and letting it just move below my feet more with more ease, as well as using that roll to my advantage of having more ease getting in and out of draft trains and races, as well as maintaining a straight direction when I'm paddling, especially in side chop or wind. So what that is saying, as you can see, as I'm talking here and as I'm talking it out, there are reasons why the board has these designs to it, but it also adds another layer of challenge of learning how to master this board for pivot turns, as well as just stability, your secondary stability with the extra roll to it. So there are two major things that I've really noticed since having this board and using it, that is a challenge. And if you're someone who's new to stand-up paddleboard racing, you're not used to these narrower boards like this one, you will find that challenging as well. So there's something to consider with this board, that stability is a learning curve, the way this board is designed. All right, I'm gonna paddle for a little bit more here now, and I'll talk a little about some things that I would maybe change about this board or consider for a future purchase. Comes a topic about if there's anything I would change about this board, there's honestly not really anything that I would change about the design of the paddle board, but rather it's been more of a learning curve for me how to understand how this board handles in a variety of conditions on the water with the way that it is designed. Because obviously every single race board out there on the market is going to handle the water differently. And so for me, I've had to learn how to adjust my riding style from my previous board with how this board handles and what it's capable of on the water. So with that being said, if I did have to look forward to do like a repurchase of this paddle board and having all the knowledge I have now about it after using it for 6 months, I would actually choose to buy the wider model of this paddle board. So this board, as I said, is 22.5 inches wide. And if I did it all over again, I would actually probably choose a 24-inch wide model. Now, the reason for that is because I enjoy getting to know one board really well. I don't have a massive quiver of boards in my house, and I really do ride this board and basically in all types of conditions on the water. And even though I do find this board pretty stable to use, it is still quite challenging to use, such as like downwind paddle sessions. And I love a good downwind paddle session. And unfortunately, with this board being so narrow, it can be quite challenging to not fall off it so much in those choppier conditions. And for me to get more enjoyment out of like a downwind session on top of my paddle board, I actually probably would choose the wider model to gain that extra stability and be able to use this board in a wider range of conditions. Because with that as well, especially when it comes to my racing, I get way more power out of my paddle strokes when I'm stable on my paddle board. So if I'm having to use a narrower board that I don't feel stable on, I'm losing power in my paddle strokes because I'm compensating for stability on my paddle board. So with that being said, once again, if I have a wider paddle board, sure, it's a little bit heavier and sure, it drags just a little bit more in the water, but I'm getting more power in my strokes because I'm on a more stable surface such as the wider paddle board. So even though I'm still super happy with this board right here below my feet at 22.5 inches wide, 22.5 inches wide, and I use it in a variety of conditions and I get great stability out of it and a lot of enjoyment, if I had to do it all over again and buy one board to do it all, it would be the 24-inch wide model. So at the end of the day, the real question is, who is this board really meant and designed for? And after using it now for several months, the first thing I would say is if you're looking for a board that can handle almost any conditions there are on the water, this is the board for you. Having the dugout design in this board allows you to have such great stability, having your gravity, one, lower to the water surface, and two, having those nice tall rails to give you great secondary stability. Now, I would buy this board, as I said, in a wider model for more stability as well, but overall in general, this board handles almost any conditions that are on the water, surf, downwind conditions, flat water days, it does it all. And so overall, this board is like a one quiver board master. And with that being said, it goes along with my second pro point about this board. If you're someone who wants a board that has really good secondary stability, once again, having this dugout design is gonna give you that increased secondary stability. And finally, if you're someone who's simply looking to upgrade your race board and simply have a faster board below your feet, this board is the board for you. So all that to say, and to wrap things up, I really do enjoy using this board. I'm still stoked to continue to train on it and prep for my next race season coming up here in 2025. Then as I close things out here, this video is sponsored by Infinity Surf. So yes, with that being said, I am gonna be a little bit biased towards this race board, but even with that being said, I do really enjoy using it. So if you guys are looking for a new race board or for a new stand-up paddle board for surfing or for just all-around use with your family or even just surfboards in general, go check out infinitysurf.com, as they have a wide range of boards for you to use on the water and suit to fit your needs. So go check them out, get your next board, and I'll see you on the water next time.